Time to play... Yep, Virtual Boy. This is Wario Land, the Virtual Boy. I don't know why the screen is purple.
Yeah, so for whatever reason, Nintendo decided it would be a good idea to immediately follow up Wario Land with a Virtual Boy sequel. You don't need me to tell you the whole song and dance of the Virtual Boy, this thing flopped hard. The console really didn't have a killer app, and despite it being a headset, you couldn't play VR chat on it, so it was kinda doomed to fail from the start.
Suck my dick.
Still, you've gotta commend Nintendo for even trying something like a dedicated headset console in the 90s. That idea on paper probably blew everyone's mind in the office room when they came up with it. That's some shit you'd see on The Simpsons as a gag at the time and laugh. Honestly, the hardware of the Virtual Boy isn't even that bad. It's a 32-bit console and its only real technical drawback was its limited color palette. Even if the Virtual Boy had a full range of color, I feel like it wouldn't be as memorable or iconic of a console as it is nowadays. Its biggest prohibitor was its shitty library. In all honesty, the best game on the system is probably Wario Land. You know, unless you're counting Bound High, Mario Clash, Italo Boxer and Panic Bomber and Nestor's Funky Bowling.
Fair.
It's odd to me because the Virtual Boy seemed like a novelty on arrival, and who the fuck is buying a console for novelty in 1995? Plenty of people will buy this stupid crank Game Boy or cardboard bullshit now, but pull that shit back then and people are just gonna ignore you. At worst, they'll point and laugh, which is what ended up happening anyway. Everything surrounding the Virtual Boy's failure cements it as a joke to everyone, even Nintendo fans.
Mario, your eyes are all red. You've been playing Virtual Boy for 10 hours.
Hell, even Nintendo makes fun of this thing. Well, you know what? Fuck these guys, because Wario Land is fucking awesome. Imagine being a kid in 95 with this stupid robot tumor attached to your face while everyone makes fun of you on the bus ride home from school. Well, for all you know, they're an enemy in Wario. Fuck out of here!
Oh my god. Oh my god!
Before we start talking about the game, I guess I should give a prerequisite about what you're seeing right now. This is the game running off the emulator VB Jin. Now, I'm no expert when it comes to making games look the best they can on these things, and camera movement and fluid motion always seem to end up looking crusty, but I tried my best to make it look passable here. Due to the emulator, most of the 3D effects of items swinging from the foreground to the background look glitched, but only upon transition between the two planes, so I apologize for that. The emulator also automatically color corrects the Virtual Boy to this weird, hot, pinkish purple too, but I ended up really liking it. It exemplifies the way they use different shades a lot better than red or grayscale. I'm guessing it's because the emulator designates the left and right eye layers to blue and red respectively, making the mixture purple, which is kinda cool. Mostly everyone I've seen talk about Virtual Boy games online color correct the games from red to grayscale. Just kinda makes it boring. The Virtual Boy is comparable to the Game Boy, so fuck it, why not color correct it to green? I don't know, do something cool like AVGN did.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 3?
He zoomed the camera into the lens of the actual console. That's gorilla as fuck. And you know what? Hold on. You remember when Let's Players would fucking do this shit? Prop their cameras up in front of their TVs and just talk over the game for 10 minutes, then upload it?
Oh man, I have a lot of games. Look at all these. Man. Look at all these. Sheesh. Oh, that's right, Mega Man 2. Alright, whatever.
Bring that shit back. When I originally got the idea for this video, I was really into modding and homebrew on my Wii, so I filled it with a fuck ton of emulators. I really like the homebrew menu. It's got a nice aesthetic to it, and watching the menu fill up with all these applications you load onto it is a cool experience. Every homebrew menu shows what kind of person you are in a way. The personalization of having custom apps on your Wii that someone else doesn't is really cool to me. I was the kind of person who wouldn't load the custom apps onto the Wii home screen itself. I kind of liked going into the dedicated homebrew app to access them all. This was back when I didn't have a proper PC, so homebrew was more of a cool alternative preference for emulation. I even recorded myself playing Wario Land 4 that way for this video. Originally, all the footage for each game in this video was just going to be recorded off my phone pointed at the TV. I'm still definitely interested in getting a capture card, but I think I'd want to get one that really captures the low fidelity of early SD TVs. Now hear me out here, you'd see this shit everywhere like 9 to 10 years ago on YouTube. Anyone who wanted to do Let's Plays and be somewhat professional bought a capture card, but since the standard for TVs at the time wasn't completely HD and capture devices for these consoles were relatively new, often the output really highlighted how low quality the conversion was. That might not be the real reason, but that's what I'm assuming. I'm not a genius on this shit, but it is interesting. It's a super specific thing and it isn't really an issue anymore, but I really dig the way these videos are captured. The best example I have for what I'm talking about is a Super Gaming Bros Scott Pilgrim playthrough. You can see the shakiness of the scan lines of the TV they're playing on, and it makes the pixels blend together with how shitty the bitrate is. But it exudes this unattainable charm that no other capture does. I swear, you can taste the RGB on this. I really wish more games had filters like this instead of that so-called CRT filter where they just add a really shitty looking scanline filter and a bend to the display. This shit just looks so tacky. I'd much rather have a filter that looks like this. It just looks and feels way more authentic. I played Mario 1 on FCEUX with this filter and it looked great. Hey, by the way, this Scott Pilgrim game is fucking awesome. Okay, anyway, changing titles from Wario's Treasure Hunt to Wario Cruise until finally settling on Virtual Boy Wario Land, this is another shitty name. Why didn't you just call it Wario Land 2? This game is 100% a sequel to Wario Land 1 in like every way. Why reserve the title for a game that changes the formula entirely from its predecessors? I know the game's on the Virtual Boy. It's on the front of the damn box. Why do you gotta remind me of my shitty purchase twice? At least it's better than what they called it in Japan. Bacharu Boy, Wario Rando Awaza no Hio. What am I, speaking another language? Virtual Boy Wario Land had Hiroji Kiyotake in the hot seat as director again, but this time a Hirofumi Matsuoka would co-direct with him. He's the guy I mentioned earlier. Matsuoka was heavily involved with the original Mario Land, but he's worked at Nintendo's R&D1 team since the 80s. He worked on games like the NES Metroid and Kid Icarus. The way that Metroid, Kid Icarus, and Wario all correlated to each other was always so interesting to me. There's a lot of comparisons you can draw between them that just make sense. Matsuoka also directed Mario Paint, so he definitely deserves some kind of award. I really wish I could commend all the guys on the staff, especially the programming team, because they really did a great job with this one. Again, there isn't a lot of information about the development of these games, and I don't fuck around with code, so I can't really say anything concrete about the work that went into this game underneath the hood.
Stop! Colin! Why would you do that? Why would you put water? Why the fuck would you do that?
All I can really give is a thumbs up and go, good job, guys. But it's a really big thumbs up, and I'm saying good job just slightly louder than average. In all honesty, if the Virtual Boy had full color capability, the way the 3D is conveyed might do a disservice to this game's style. Maybe I'm talking out of my ass here, but you could probably hack Virtual Boy games to have full color so that the 3D can be exemplified better, but I don't know. There's something fitting about only having one color. It's probably because it was a genuine limitation other consoles didn't have to worry about, so the sprite work and pseudo 3D were based around it. The only reason the Virtual Boy even has one color is because the dude behind the tech spent too much of his money on McDonald's Big Macs and couldn't afford a full color range of LEDs. So he could only get the red one. When Nintendo bought the tech off the guy and found time to start developing a console around it, Hiroshi Yamauchi told Gunpei Yokoi to hold back on Mario.
Gunpei Yokoi, if you don't know, is the creator of the original Game Boy, and who also, if you don't know, is dead. He died.
Mario 64 was in development, and they wanted that in the spotlight. At the time, a sequel to Mario Land was in development for the console, but after being told this, the project was retooled into a sequel to Wario Land. They decided against changing Wario's moveset too much, but they did change up his physics a lot. For one, his shoulder bash was given a tremendous speed boost and added momentum. Upon performing a shoulder bash, Wario gains tons of speed as afterimages trail behind him. In this speed state, you can immediately jump and carry that horizontal speed with you into the air. Upon landing or ending of the shoulder bash, your speed state is still carried over for a slight amount of time, signified by the afterimages. If you perform another shoulder bash in this window, you can maintain your speed continuously in a cycle. This allows you to string multiple shoulder bashes and jumps together in succession for maximum horizontal speed, and it feels great. This is unlike Wario Land 1, in which the shoulder bash didn't carry any momentum and only acted as a slight speed boost. The way it works in Virtual Boy Wario Land really complements the game's more horizontal level design. It's kinda like Sonic Advance 2, and that game rules! Wario has a normal run too now, which just allows him to move a bit faster on the ground than normal. It's a nice addition for the more calculated jumps, which require a specific amount of momentum. Since Wario's traveling up and out of a cave system he fell into, the end of every level is an elevator that takes you further and further up. I really like this format for level progression. I love the little mole tallying my progress, and I like that I stopped the elevator at a pit stop to grab more lives or gamble all my money away.
1, 2, 3, or 4. Everybody.
2, 4.
3. I'm gonna pick 1.
But I do wish there was some kind of world map. It would have been cool to see Wario climbing his way up through these caverns and finding himself in all these new precarious areas signified by a graphic on the map. Maybe every boss level could have ended with a demolition, causing the rest of the world to become explorable, or maybe just let me pick which level to explore first. When I picture what I want out of a map for this game, I imagine something structured mechanically and visually like that new alien hominid. That game's map leaves it up to the player to decide which levels they want to tackle, while visually conveying how difficult or lengthy they are just by their shape. That game's demo was pretty good, I liked it a lot. The elevator ain't bad. It's a simple screen and adds a lot to the already arcadey vibe of the game, which I'll talk about later, but something with a little more depth would have added to the world and would have definitely been appreciated. Then again, they probably didn't think about this too hard. I'm sure they'd rather be making this game on anything but a Pheropter. This game really lets you know what you're getting into. The elevator shows you how many levels you have left in the game as a whole. 14 levels, 4 of which are bosses. Surprise, surprise, this game's pretty damn short. Nice job, jackass. You just paid $40 for a 2-hour game in 1995! The game length is a point of criticism for a lot of people, but for me personally, I don't really mind it. It elevates the arcade vibes and makes the game super replayable. This game already has elements of a score attack game, with all your treasure tallying into a high score at the end, which affects your ending. And its length only encourages the player to learn more about it. If there's only 10 stages, I guess I better explore them as much as I can since I'm not going to be here long. It's fun, it reminds me a bit of Luigi's Mansion. Both games are pretty short and tally your score at the end and have treasure collection as a central mechanic. They're also both Nintendo games that are on failure consoles, but I guess you could say that about any two Nintendo games. They were also both composed by Kazumi Totaka, which I guess I should talk about here. The soundtrack is a bit unremarkable, but some standout tracks include the game's intro theme, which has this blaringly loud startup, and the 4th level theme, which uses the game's leitmotif in a really upbeat way. I won't spend too much time talking about the music because I bet you already know who Totaka is, but in case you don't, he composed for games like Mario Paint, Mario Land 2, and the original Animal Crossing. 2 of those are Matsuoka and Kiyotake games, and it makes me wonder how involved the directors of these games are in the process of choosing their staff. I guess that's more of a producer's job, but for all I know, they just pull names out of a hat every time or something, I don't know. Totaka's a pretty clear-cut guy from what I can tell. I was reading this interview with Koji Kondo and him, and Kondo is spouting a bunch of bullshit like, I think all humans have an inherent sense of rhythm, whether it be someone creating visuals or audio, and Totaka just goes, yes! Like, come on, man, you made the Wii Shop song! Being on the Virtual Boy, the devs really wanted to incorporate 3D in some way into the game, so they came up with the idea of being able to jump into the background and foreground off these springs, a mechanic they would sell back to you 20 years later with Kirby, and really hammer it in! It's on the fucking back of the box. They call it Deluxe Action. Deluxe Action my ass. What does Wario say on the back of the box? It says incredible 3D graphics and astounding levels because that's what it is. Yeah, it is scheming action. I'm fucking Wario! I tried to find any staff crossover between Kirby Triple Deluxe and Virtual Boy Wario Land to see if this was really just a rehash, but there's only one dude. Yasuo Inoue, printed artist for Virtual Boy Wario Land and manual editor for Triple Deluxe. Yeesh. Imagine being a fucking awesome artist at Nintendo that did art for these awesome Wario games, then they tell you to edit their shitty manuals no one will read. Damn, that fucking sucks. The background shenanigans often get called a gimmick, but the way it's done within the levels and boss fights really cement itself as a mechanic. We could sit here all day and argue the difference between a gimmick and a mechanic, but when it comes down to it, it doesn't really matter. A mechanic can feel gimmicky, and a gimmick can be integrated so well that it's considered a mechanic. What matters is if it's fun and if it works, and it definitely does here. While the main mechanic consists of switching between platforms in the background and the foreground, obstacles can also swing back and forth from the two planes. Going into the background is often necessary for level completion, but can also house optional goodies like treasures or power-ups. There's this really cool part in the second level where you can see a fuck ton of blocks in the background, but there's no spring in your immediate vision that'll take you there. Where you're standing are these crates arranged in a peculiar way, and ground pounding in the middle of them reveals the spring that takes you over there. Later in the level, it's the same situation but without the strange arrangement, causing your instincts to kick in about these odd crates. Once you ground pound on them, it reveals the spring. The game is chock full of secret progression like that. It's my favorite shit ever, and the background mechanics only elevate what they can do with it. The levels are actually the best part of this game. They all offer something new, whether it be a new locale, mechanic, or enemy. Most levels are structured horizontally, which really complements Wario's speed, like I said before. The more vertical levels aren't bad, but definitely de-emphasize Wario's mobility. It really makes me wish he had a super jump, which was strangely taken out of this game. They could have kept it in and added the visual conveyance it needed to have more feedback, and I think it would have added a lot to these more scaling levels. It would have been interesting to include jumps that require the super jump, or maybe secrets that need the shoulder bash and super jump. I'm trying to say that there should be puzzles that require both the super jump and the shoulder bash. Maybe in your afterimage state, if you performed a super jump, it would send you higher than a normal one. I'm just spitballing here, but I personally think it would have made for some really unique time platforming. This game doesn't have a lot of tension-based platforming, but I'm imagining a level where lava's rising and you need to rush to the top, combining shoulder bash speed and well-timed super jumps to clear tight gaps. There's stuff like this in Wario Land 4, hell, it's the crux of the entire timed escape sections, but I think it could work great here too. It's like when you kill Ridley in Metroid and you have to climb up the level before it all explodes. Actually, Metroid and Wario share a lot of DNA. I didn't mention this before, but Hiroji Kiyotake actually designed Samus, and he also directed Metroid 2. These two franchises ended up diverging in completely different paths, but the early Metroid games share a lot with the early Wario games, most notably on the Game Boy Advance. Kiyotake also did work on Kid Icarus with Matsuoka. This means Wario's perfect, because Kid Icarus is also perfect. Like I said before, these stages are fucking great. I love this one where you can get flung into the background by these spatula platforms. This one where you jump on these tornadoes in the desert has a great style. And this one where you're exploring a fruit factory has a fun gimmick where you have to time dropping these watermelons into the background to progress. I really only ended up having issue with 2 levels, this haunted hallway one and the last level before the final boss. Since there's only 10 levels in this game, a lot of room is left over in making sure each level is as polished as it can be, except for these 2. In level 9, you cross a bunch of similar looking hallways in this mansion haunted by ghosts. These hallways exist within both the foreground and the background, so it became very easy to get lost. The key to exit the level is hidden in a clock that doesn't expose its contents unless you wait around a little bit in the room, which is kinda bullshit. As for the final level in the game, everything is just super cluttered. Maybe it would look better on actual hardware, but this background is super busy and it makes it kind of disorienting to travel around, especially when the platforming is so tight here. It made it really difficult to see where I was going, and for the longest time I didn't see this fucking door here. The level itself isn't too hard, but I just wish the background was more subdued. Either way, even if these levels aren't the best, they're not infuriating. 8 out of 10 isn't a bad score, and even then I wouldn't consider these 2 levels to be horrible, so it's more like an 8.5 out of 10. Boss design in platformers is something I think gets overlooked a lot when critically analyzing the genre. Lots of work goes into that shit. Wario Land 1 took a lot of time in making sure its bosses had as much mechanical depth as possible, allowing the player to control the pace of the fight based on what they knew about the game, their moveset, and the boss's patterns and vulnerability. Virtual Boy Wario Land gives the pace control back to the bosses themselves, which is functional, but definitely a bit boring. The bosses are good fun, but they're definitely lacking in mechanical depth compared to the game's predecessor. The game has a pretty traditional boss structure. You hit them 3 times and they're done, but mixing that structure with the game's 3D mechanics helps out pacing issues. Before each boss, you have to trigger a switch to open the boss door. You do that by having a little mini-boss fight with this block thing. It gets more and more powerful with each boss you fight, and I really like the idea of fighting the same mini-boss before each main boss, but damn, I wish this thing was like a character. What if you fought Captain Syrup here? She could easily be here also going after the same treasure Wario is. The idea reminds me a bit of Proto Man, but it just kinda makes me wish it was that exactly. What if there was an entirely new character trying to stop Wario from progressing? My immediate idea is a character who's the hero of this cave setting. They'd be trying to stop Wario from defeating the boss so that they could do it themselves. They could be like the protagonist to the game you're not playing. In fact, this whole game sort of feels like Wario stumbled into the wrong game.
Here I go! Why,
He just sort of falls into this place. The setting isn't very Mario-like. The enemies are all completely new. There are no returning enemies from the first game, and none of these guys ever come back either. You could argue all the Wario Land games feel like this, but 4 out of 6 have returning characters and even continuous plot elements. The only games that don't are this one and Wario Land 4, both of which are coincidentally directed by the same guy. In any case, these mini-bosses are alright as they are. I just kinda wish they had a bit more character to them. It would add a lot to the setting to see its inhabitants. Well, you know, at least there's this mole dude. The first boss is this little homunculus crawling around, and his name is fucking Dinosaur Fish. Ah, geez, you know, you couldn't have come up with like a better name? It's not just this guy either, it's all the fucking bosses. Sandfish, Tank and Operator, Demon Head, Jesus Christ. These aren't just unimaginative headcanon names either, these are official names upon request from Nintendo of America. This dude emailed Nintendo of America just to get these names. I'd be disappointed as fuck. Like, let's call Bowser Bad Turtle. Ganondorf can be like threatening Arab. And Eggman, oh wait, Dino Fish sits in the background for a while before chucking the spike ball on his head towards you. Once he jumps into the foreground, he starts flinging the ball at you, leaving his bald head exposed for a really specific tight window. As far as I know, the only way to do damage to this guy is to jump on his bald head, but the window's almost too demanding for a first boss. I died a lot on this. It isn't too frustrating once you get it, but I wish you could shoulder bash him to knock him over or something and like proceed with a ground pound on his belly. The second boss, Sandfish, feels like a more fitting first boss, despite the setting. You dodge his ceiling attack that destroys a part of the ground you're on, which ends up leaving him open for you to jump on. While I did have fun with these bosses, and I think they progress at a nice pace, I do wish they at least had multiple ways to damage them once they are vulnerable. The only boss with any kind of freedom is the tank and operator. Instead of stomping on his head to reveal his weak point, you can shoulder bash it. This allows you to stun lock him and get all 3 of your hits on his weak point super quickly. It's really the only boss that uses what you know about Wario's movement in a way that gives you control of the pace of the fight, but it's kinda too short in that way. Again, it's not a bad thing that the bosses have the control. It can make for some really tense fights, especially for the last boss, but I definitely prefer the structure of the previous game's bosses. Come Wario Land 4, I think they found a happy medium between the two boss structures that works as a perfect blend. Wario Land has a super heavy focus on bosses too, so it's equally as important to me that the bosses are good in tandem with the levels, even if they only make up less than half of the game. Demon Head was pretty fucking frustrating though. It's a pretty straightforward boss, but Jesus Christ, he has so much bullshit to him. He rarely leaves himself open for an attack, and the window to damage him is way stricter than it needs to be. You need to account for the time it takes Wario to get as high as he needs to hit his nose, but that's considering Demon Head is in the right position to begin with. Every time you hit him, he flies around the arena faster and faster, and it feels like it comes down to dumb luck whether or not you'll end up hitting him when you jump. On top of that, he has this shitty fire attack that lasts way too long and is barely avoidable with how much it trails. If I had the fucking super jump, this attack wouldn't be as much of a problem as it is. And to top it all off, he's the only boss in the game that goes against the 3-hit rule.
Oh, we're still not done.
If anything, I would have rather the previous 3 bosses go against that rule. They're pretty short fights, so I think increasing how many hits they can take would leave more time and room for the bosses to do more interesting things that the player would have to react to. I think giving Demon Head only 3 hits would make the balance between him having pace progression and my patience in fighting the boss more equal. As it is, beating Demon Head doesn't really feel satisfying, and I think it's because the boss has a really arbitrary difficulty. It sucks to see, especially since the levels in this game are fantastic. Before we finish up here, I want to talk a little bit about the promotional artwork. There are 4 dudes responsible for the printed artwork of this game. Noriyuki Sato, Norikatsu Furuta, Yusuke Nakano, and oh hey, Yasuo Inoue. A little weird these 2 pairs of dudes have really similar sounding names, but I guess that's Japan for you. All 4 of these dudes have pretty huge backgrounds as artists at Nintendo, and I learned a lot researching them, but before I get into that, holy shit! The art they did for this game is fucking fantastic. I really like this piece that shows the stage progression. Kinda reminds me a little bit of the NES Castlevania. If I were to remake this game, this would totally be the aesthetic of the map screen I was talking about earlier. I really don't know why Nintendo is so adamantly against 2D art styles for their games nowadays. Almost every in-house Nintendo game released in the past decade was 3D, whether they existed on 2 axes or not. I would love to see a new Wario Land game with hand-drawn 2D graphics in this exact style, or a Mario game with art direction from Yoichi Kotabe, or anything sprite-based for that matter. It feels like Nintendo sees sprite-based art direction to be discreetly retro, and don't see it as a valid direction for games anymore. It doesn't really make any sense. Sprite-based indie games sell like crazy on the Switch, so you'd think they'd try to cash in on that and try their hand at something like it again, but no. I mean, come on, Nintendo, Undertale doesn't look that ugly. With how many artists work at the company and how little of them actually end up directing their own games, it makes me wonder how much of an artist people like Miyamoto or Aonuma think of themselves. Maybe they see themselves as visionaries or something gay like that. Reggie is a visionary, you Japanese fucks. He's Haitian! This Noriyuki Sato guy actually did end up directing a game called Kiki Trick for the Wii though. I watched this video of Iwata and some guy who isn't Sato playing it, and it's like this weird sound matching game. I mean, okay, yeah, it's pretty unique. Inoue worked on the art for games like Mario Strikers, which everyone seems to really ruin their favorite pair of shorts over, and the manual for Kirby Triple Deluxe! The most standout of all these guys is probably Yusuke Nakano, who you probably know as the guy who photoshopped Steve onto the Smash Ultimate banner. Anyway, I'm only talking about these guys because they're all good artists who still work at the company, and they do a lot of good work for the creative conveyance of the games they work on. Having them all here, on Wario Land, speaks a lot of volume to how they started, where they ended up, and how Nintendo prioritizes their artists. Now, I'm not trying to say that Nintendo hates their artists or something really accusatory like that. I'm just saying that I want Nintendo to embrace their artists more. You got a lot of really talented guys here, give them the chance to make more of their own games. Hiroji Kiyotake started as an artist and he fucking made Wario for you. All in all though, Virtual Boy Wario Land is pretty fucking fantastic. This was the first Wario Land game to introduce an aspect of exploration beyond finding treasures to add to score, cementing exploration in the franchise's DNA. The next 2 games in the series would end up prioritizing puzzle solving and exploration instead of platforming, but I think this game strikes an almost perfect balance. Despite there being a key to collect every level, 10 treasures to find, and secret endings based on how much money you have, Virtual Boy Wario Land often leans towards being an action platformer rather than a puzzle exploration game. I can't call this game a puzzle platformer, but I also can't call it a pure platformer, so it really is a blend. I see this game as a completely necessary stepping stone between the fundamentals introduced in the first game and concepts introduced that were further evolved in Wario Land 4, which is a fucking awesome game. The mechanical concept of switching from the foreground to the background isn't anything revolutionary. Tons of games have done it before and after this one, but the way it's executed isn't overly annoying or underutilized. You can definitely call it a gimmick relative to the console, but it doesn't make it any less valid as an inclusion. When I think about it, they really missed out not remaking or porting this game to 3DS. Nintendo's always been fucking around with 3D technology, as early as the 90s, and they even went as far as to consider implementing it into the GameCube, but never really got it right until the 3DS. I think a game like this would be right at home on a handheld like that. It's super short, but super replayable. Why didn't they ever add it to the 3D Classics line or something? It's a little amazing to me that they were able to make such a good game on a Doom from the Start console. They really put passion into this project and it shows. The momentum-based physics do wonders in tandem with the level design, and the introductory exploration mechanics create a fertile soil for future games in the series to really shine. And they did it all on the fucking Virtual Boy!